What if one man's greed caused the deaths of approximately 10 million people, more than the combined casualties of many modern conflicts, yet his name remains largely erased from history? This is not a myth or a legend, but a brutal reality rooted in recent history. The man behind this atrocity was King Leopold II of Belgium, a monarch whose reign of terror in the Congo ranks among the most heinous crimes of modern times. Today, we unveil 10 dark truths that reveal the true horror behind Leopold's empire, exposing how a European king transformed the Congo into a blood-soaked domain of suffering, all while his name was erased from the collective conscience. 1. The Congo was not a colony, it was Leopold's private fiefdom. Leopold's claim to fame was not merely colonization, but the creation of the Congo Free State, an estate he owned personally. Unlike other European powers that governed colonies on behalf of their nations, Leopold treated the Congo as his private property, ruling with absolute authority. This distinction is critical. Leopold's regime was not a state enterprise but a personal enterprise. The Belgian government, initially reluctant, was coerced into supporting his venture, but ultimately, Leopold wielded unchecked power over millions of Congolese lives. This arrangement allowed him to exploit the region's resources and people with minimal oversight or accountability, transforming the Congo into his personal cash cow. His private ownership meant profits were directly his, and the suffering of the Congolese was a means to that end. 2. Exploitation for rubber and ivory. Leopold's empire thrived during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a period marked by rapid industrialization and a voracious demand for raw materials like rubber and ivory. The Congo's dense rubber vines became the foundation of Leopold's immense wealth. The rubber industry was especially brutal. Villagers and local communities were forcibly conscripted into labor, often through coercion, threats, or violence. They were required to meet impossible quotas, often under the threat of mutilation or death, and failure meant brutal punishment or execution. Ivory harvesting was similarly exploitative, using violent methods to hunt elephants, with little regard for sustainability or human rights. The region became a resource-rich prison camp where wealth was extracted through violence and terror. 3. Systematic use of violence and terror. Leopold's regime relied on the force publique, a brutal military force composed mainly of African soldiers led by European officers. Their role was not to protect, but to enforce Leopold's rule through terror. Entire villages were burned to the ground, residents kidnapped and sent into forced labor, women raped, elders executed, and resistance crushed with extreme brutality. The regime's violence was not random but methodical, designed to instill fear and suppress any opposition. 4. The severed hand as a business card. One of the most infamous and grotesque policies was the use of severed hands as proof of bullet usage. Soldiers and agents were required to return with a hand or foot to demonstrate they had wasted no ammunition or to show they had killed their quota of villagers. Failure to produce these body parts often resulted in mutilation or death, and the mutilated limbs were sometimes sold as trophies. This dehumanizing practice turned human limbs into currency, a chilling symbol of Leopold's regime's brutality. 5. The demographic catastrophe. Leopold's reign precipitated a demographic collapse in the Congo. Estimates suggest that the population, which was around 20 million at the start of his rule, was decimated, dropping to approximately 10 million by the time his regime ended. Overwork, starvation, disease, such as smallpox and sleeping sickness, and systematic violence decimated communities. Entire villages were wiped out, and many Congolese people died not from warfare, but from the relentless exploitation and neglect. 6. Indifference from the European world. Despite the scale of his atrocities, Leopold remained in Belgium, detached from the suffering he caused. He never visited the Congo himself, relying instead on reports from agents, traders, and middlemen. European elites, eager for colonial expansion and economic gain, praised him. The Belgian press lauded his civilizing mission, and many in Europe turned a blind eye to the bloodshed. International diplomacy was slow to act, and widespread indifference allowed Leopold to continue his brutal regime unchallenged for years. This silence and inaction from the broader European community played a crucial role in enabling the atrocities to persist. 7. Resistance and exposure. A few brave individuals dared to expose the truth about Leopold's Congo. Among them was E.D. Morel, a British shipping clerk who noticed disturbing patterns. Ships going to Congo carried weapons, chains, and other tools of forced labour, while returning ships were laden with rubber and ivory. Morel risked his reputation and safety to publish reports revealing the horrors. Alongside Irish diplomat Roger Casement, who documented widespread atrocities, they launched one of the first international human rights movements calling for justice. 8. The end of Leopold's private empire. Leopold was ultimately forced to relinquish control of the Congo in 1908 amid mounting international pressure and mounting evidence of his regime's brutality. The Belgian government formally took over, creating the Belgian Congo, but the exploitation and violence persisted under colonial rule. Leopold died a year later, in 1909, in wealth and comfort, leaving behind a legacy stained with blood. 9. The long-lasting impact. The brutality inflicted during Leopold's rule left deep scars on the Congo's social, political, and economic fabric. When the country gained independence in 1960, it was politically unstable, impoverished, and plagued by conflict. The legacy of exploitation, corruption, and violence persisted, fueling decades of civil war, dictatorship, and underdevelopment. The Congo's abundant resources, diamonds, copper, coltan, and more, continue to be exploited by multinational corporations and corrupt regimes, often echoing Leopold's predatory methods. 10. The silence and the forgotten truth. Despite the staggering number of deaths and the scale of his crimes, Leopold's name is seldom associated with atrocities in mainstream history. Statues still stand honoring him, and his name appears on streets, currency, and institutions. His crimes are barely taught in schools, and the victims, many nameless and faceless, remain forgotten. This silence perpetuates a dangerous cycle. It allows modern exploiters, corrupt officials, and corporations to imitate Leopold's methods, profiting from suffering without consequence. Remembering the blood-stained crown, the story of King Leopold II is a stark warning of how greed and unchecked power can obliterate human lives. He murdered an estimated 10 million Congolese people, more than the casualties of entire wars. Yet his name remains largely unspoken in mainstream narratives. His regime was built on systematic violence, dehumanization, and greed. As we reflect on this dark chapter, we must ask ourselves how many atrocities remain hidden, how many modern systems continue Leopold's legacy of exploitation. Share this story, challenge the myths, break the silence, never forget the blood-soaked crown of Leopold II.